featuring two 14-year-olds, Dee and his buddy Monroe. And it was witnessed by the right person, which led both of the kids to be introduced to the sport of boxing. 1932, a short 4 years later, Dee became St. Louis Golden Gloves champ, shortly thereafter relocating to a permanent home of Flint, where his cousin, a few years earlier, William Cavette, recently became the first black high school team captain while he was at Flint Central. Dee and his brother Jerry, they under Coach Gene Martin, would enter fights in and around the Flint area in the state of Michigan, where Dee pulled together a 3-year unbeaten streak and amassed over 14 amateur titles to include the Golden Gloves, Diamond Belt, and the 1936 General Motors National Tournament featuring the country's elite. That tournament was held before 22,000 people at Flint Stadium, but the special guest referee for Dee's finals match was none other than American boxing team member trained at Detroit's famed Brewster Wheeler Rec Center in Detroit. He was training with Joe Louis at the time, who was now a professional. 1940s, Dee began his four-decade coaching career, quickly becoming one of the top amateur boxing coaches, breaking the color barrier, as white and Hispanic fighters both now would come and gravitate to his gyms. First at the FICC, which was the Flint Interracial Community Center, that was on St. John Street on Flint's north end. On the south end, he was at Clifford Street Center, which was at Clifford and 12th Street, which is across the street basically from the Golden Leaf Club, if you know where that is. He also coached downtown Flint and top of the old Rialto Theater. This came from my cousin Sandra. I did not know that until she told me that, but she remembers going there. But the history he made was at Burston Fieldhouse, because in numerous ways he was given in early history in Flint, the segregation that we had at that time at Burston Fieldhouse. When he became coach there, it had been just a few years earlier that blacks were only allowed to swim there 1 day per week. And what they would do after that swim session, they would drain the pool, clean the pool, and then refill the pool. Dee was now entered as coach at that same facility, but it all came full circle because just a few recent years ago, Dee was now had his name on that very building. So if you ever hear of the FWC Burston, well, the F is for Floyd Fielder, the L is for Ulysses Walker, and the C is for Dee Cavette.
All right.
Now quickly, these numerous champions would include Richard Dix, Leon Bumper Lawson, who was the former, who was Muhammad Ali's former schoolmate and sparring partner. Hall of Famers Dee once coached would be Joe Berg, Hollywood actor Tony Burton. If you remember any of the Rocky movies, all of you seen Tony Burton.
That's right.
If you've seen Apollo Creed and his trainer, that black bald-headed man, he's from Flint, went to Flint Northern High School, was an all-state halfback at Flint High School, but he went and trained at Burston Fieldhouse under Dee Cavette. So Dee has a stretch all the way to Hollywood. Now, for his friendships, because I know you want to know his friendships, yes. He knew Archie Moore, he knew Sonny Liston, he knew Sugar Ray Leonard, and he knew Emmanuel Stewart, who was probably one of the greatest trainers of all time. But last but not least, I'll say for you, I briefly mentioned Jerry Cavette, older brother to Dee. Well, they had a special bond, and Jerry did as Dee did, both for decades coaching Flint fighters, Jerry at Clark School and at Elm Park. Early on, the fighters would represent Grand Rapids and Detroit. They didn't have a Flint Golden Gloves at the time. So growing up, I would hear mentioned all the time, your name's Cavette, your uncle's created the Golden Gloves, but I couldn't find any proof of it. Even at doctor's office, 2010, aging Joe Berg, he came across the office when he heard my name, and he said, you Cavette, your uncles taught me how to fight, and they started the Golden Glove. Couldn't have any proof of it. So fast forward to just this past August, I was doing a Google search, not even for that, and an article popped up. Eastern Michigan Golden Gloves president was speaking about my uncles in the newspaper. The reporter's name was Dan Nielsen. He made mention of who started the Golden Gloves. And bingo, guess what he said? He said it was the Cavette brothers in the 1930s. So there I had it. Lastly, before I sit down, if you remember, I talked about Dee's getting his start in a street fight in St. Louis, Missouri. Well, he was fighting a guy by the name of Monroe, who when I asked my aunt, she couldn't remember his last name, or it was his first name, or his middle name. Turns out Monroe was named Monroe Harrison. Now what makes Monroe Harrison so special is because Monroe, in 1954, I believe it was, there was a guy in prison. He was beating up everybody in prison. And then the chaplain in the prison called up a reporter and said, hey, we need to have somebody come take a look at this guy. The reporter said, hey, I got a guy who knows more about the fight game than I do. The person he called was Monroe. So the person Monroe came to look at, they quickly put in a plan to get him released from prison early. So when they got him released from prison early, they released him to Monroe. That fighter, we all know now as Sonny Liston. So after Sonny Liston became famous and started making money, the mob came in and gave Monroe one of those offers you couldn't refuse to step aside. So that didn't stop Monroe's career. Monroe now went out and got another fighter. Now that fighter became a heavyweight champ also. And I know you, I see you over there. I got 10 seconds and I'm done. But now I forgot where I was at. So, but anyway, that other fighter would be known to us as Archie Moore, who was the second fighter that Monroe had. And then he finished his career with Leon Spinks, who I'm sure some of you that, even if you're not very old, you remember Leon, one that had no teeth. So,
talking about my homeboy.
I appreciate everybody that, my family members that came here, because they well outdid what I expected. I thought I invited about 10 people here. They overdid themselves, so I appreciate all of you, and I thank the committee, especially Gary.